Hello, everybody, and welcome to the ProgCast. I'm your host, Gregg Bendian, bringing you in-depth discussions of things musical and creative. Now we've been doing this for, I guess this is our 16th episode, and many creative and fascinating artists. The artist that we are going to be speaking with today has been active in the music scene for well over 50 years and has such a incredibly diverse background. She's a vocalist, a vocal artist, I would say, composer, an educator, an innovator, and she's comfortable with standards of jazz all the way up to free improvisation and contemporary classical composition. Everything in between. I'm so pleased to welcome my guest, Jay Clayton. Hi, Jay.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yep, I guess the operative word is eclectic.
Yes.
It's a good, I accepted that over the years, I accept it. I just say, because years ago, it's like, wow, what, I became famous in my work. I say famous, I have a good reputation. I don't know about fame, but as an avant-garde. But I'm so glad that you introduced me as someone who, I love the standards. But my first CD under my name was that one, Jay Clayton, All Out. I don't know if you have that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, yeah, it's interesting. I don't know, I'm jumping right in, but it's interesting to me about who the heck I am, but that was the first, I had recorded before with other groups, but that was under my first name. And so the question is, that's my first one. So I just always do what I'm doing now. And that's, in other words, rather, should I do a standard one? Anyway, I got lots of stories. Oh God.
Well, but that's, to stay on that point for a minute, was it that you were just always interested in a lot of things? Do singers get offered a lot of different things? Good singers, do good singers have to be well-versed in many different areas? What is your take, Jay?
Oh yeah, no, I wasn't offered anything. Okay, let me just put it that way. That isn't how it happened. I'm not one of the singers that get, say, I would like this and I would like that. I've never been. I'll tell you my short story, because I'm always curious too, about my colleagues. But how did you get, what are you doing? I'm a little girl from Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio. So it's like, but I grew up with, I didn't know they were jazz standards. My mother used to sing these tunes around the house. It was the pop music. Mm-hmm. She sounded like Billie Holiday, but she never heard of Billie Holiday, really. She knew, she didn't know that was the word jazz, whatever. But so I, when I actually ended up singing as a jazz singer, I didn't have to learn a lot of those tunes, But anyway, the way I just, I maybe there's a book you'll write. I always ask my students, what was your first experience with jazz, that you even knew anything about it, And for me, it was I know when it was. I graduated from high school in 1959. And so you have to understand, at the end of the 1950s, they were still playing standards at the dances. It was before the rock and roll, it was like, whoa.
Yes.
And I'm going to jump around a bit. Just stop me if I jump too much. But
I'm with you.
But my point was, the first time I ever sat in, who would even, what the heck is that? What was that? I went to a dance. I'm just remembering this now. And Frank Sinatra was my family, they didn't play a lot of music, but Frank Sinatra, you bet. I always went.
And you grew up Italian, right?
Yeah, I'm Italian descent. I'm second generation. All my grandparents were born there, So yeah, Frank. So I was at a dance. I can picture it. So we're talking 1959. You do the math, or 58 or 59. I can picture it in my mind, this dance, people are dancing there, and there's a band playing the standards to dance to. And I asked if I could sit in. Now, I don't know if I used those words. And it was the first time with the microphone. I just remembered I know that had to have been the first time. And I did Moonlight in Vermont.
Oh.
Which I haven't done since. And I should, because I teach in Vermont, every summer. Sheila Jordan and I do this, camp. And I said, and I'll come back in at the bridge, like I knew what a bridge was even. Why would I know that? But I'll tell you what happened was, probably prior to that, I don't know. I have a cousin who was a year older than me. We all took piano, I don't know. I just saw somebody's, I love watching interviews, by the way, and I'm going to go back and watch a bunch of yours. I love it because you find out so much about, and I forget who it was. And they said that, they took piano. Everybody took piano, But anyway, my cousin, I can visualize it. It's a big Italian family, but this particular sister of my mother, that was our social life. We'd go have dinner over there. Anyway, I was leaving the house, and my cousin Ronnie was at the door, and he handed me 3 albums. And he also had a fake book. What the heck was that, So he already was somewhat into it. And he handed me these 3 albums, and it was Dave Brubeck, Ramsey Lewis, and Miles.
Which Miles?
I think it was, it might have been Miles at the Black Hawk. That's what I'm thinking, because I know it wasn't Miles Ahead, because I think that was later. Anyway, and I don't even remember the Dave Brubeck and the Ramsey Lewis. And again, I didn't know the word jazz so much, maybe Dizzy Gillespie, I don't know. But anyway, that was it. I listened to those. I was totally, what is this? And so I joined the Columbia Record Company Club for a penny. I mean, how did I even know about that? And I ticked off jazz. So every month I got a Ellington, all of a sudden. So that was the beginning of it. And he passed, my cousin, but I through the years, I always wanted to thank him because that was it. So now what do? I'm a little girl in Ohio, right? Mm. And I was just telling one of my students this. I went to college, but no, everybody didn't go to college. I didn't even know what college was. But these people would come to our high school, and there was a representative from Miami University in Ohio, which was a school, by the way, but it was just, and it was the furthest from Youngstown. I'm from Youngstown. In other words, I knew I had to go to a state school. I did know that. I found that. So me and this girlfriend, she said, well, let's apply, blah, 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 because I'd taken piano lessons. They made me take piano lessons, which thank God, I took theory. You see, I didn't study, I didn't practice much, but I was good at it, So this girlfriend, she said, let's apply. And I made it, Well, she finked out. I went myself. Can you imagine? I'd never been any place, but I tell my students, I tell everybody, you know this, one thing leads to another. That's all I knew was I should go to college. And I always wanted to be a teacher, but I thought, how the heck do you teach anybody to teach? I still say that, by the way, you learn to teach by teaching, you learn to sing, you can help.
And sharing love for a subject, I think.
That's the biggest thing, the motivation part. You're absolutely right. But anyway, I thought, okay, so I get to this school and they ask you, what do you want to major in? I didn't even know what the heck does that mean, So they put me in elementary education, which is fine, except they did it because they figured I was going to get married and not finish school anyway, just be. But I used to sing around the dorm, a cappella. I'm telling you that I was smitten with this, lover, funny Valentine. We'd be washing the clothes. So my roommate said, well, you should be a music major. And I go, wow, great. And so it was because of her. So I did, but classical. So, I was a voice major and a piano minor because I had taken piano, And so that's what I did in the 4 years. I did graduate with a BS in music or whatever to teach. But, and here's where the coincidence comes in. There was a trombonist on campus, jazz trombonist, who had been in the service. His name was John Watson. He ended up playing with Count Basie in the end, but he was from Chicago. And my roommate said, you know, you should go sing for him. He'll tell you if you can sing. He'll tell you if you can sing jazz. And so I did. And that was it. I was in his band, $10 on the weekends. And I already had a repertoire. I already had somewhat of a repertoire, you know, thank goodness. And anyway, that was, there you go. Now I'm in it. Now what, you know, now I'm in it. And so for a couple of years, I mean, I was singing. I was growing. I figured it out to do the tunes in my own key. See, this is all I teach now. I mean, I'm helping them and saying, you got to find your key. They would fight with me. Why don't you do the original? Well, I had the range, but it didn't sound right. You know, I'm sure, you know, and so when you go to hear Ella and them, they're not singing in the original key, you know. So that was lucky. Okay, you could say luck, or you could say follow your, that's what you said. You love it and you express that, you know. So I was there for 4 years, and the band, the bass player, no, the piano player was a classical bass major who loved music. I'm still in touch with him. He's out in Seattle, but he didn't do what he didn't follow it like I did. He thought I was crazy when I decided to go to New York at 21. He's like, what, you're going to go try to make it, you know? And the bass player was a bass player, you know, was the vibes, whatever. So that was the beginning.
So what made you want to go to New York, and how did that happen for you?
Because that's what, good question. You're like, me go to New York, I mean, it was still courageous to go to the school, you know, in another place. Well, in our maybe on vacations, in the thing that really pushed it over were two vacations. I think between junior and senior year, one of them, these guys, they said, let's go to New York just for a couple of days, you know, like if you get a spring break or whatever. And I did. I don't even remember how we did it. And Steve Lacy was playing all monk. I didn't know who he was. Remember that era? In other words, these guys knew, because they turned me on to all this stuff. Even in college, like we would listen at night. They had records at night. I didn't know. I mean, I truthfully, I hadn't heard many of them, you know. And then the CDs, they played Ornette, Monk. I can remember the first time they put, what is that? You know, all that stuff. So we went, and there they said, let's go. This little club in Roswell, and Steve Lacy and them, they were playing all Monk, but they were so individual. You know what I mean? I don't know why, but just I already knew about finding your voice, not looking for it, but having your own voice, you know. They were great. So, okay, so that was one thing. Saying, wow, now New York, we did. Oh, I know. You know what? The first time I went to New York was in my high school choir.
Oh.
My teacher, again, it wasn't about jazz, but my high school choir teacher was so cool. I wish I never could see her later. We raised money, and she got us singing the choir like in churches. We stayed in a hotel for 3 or 4 days. Mm-hmm. I didn't even get to the village, but there was something about New York. You see, some people can't do it, but I got it. There was something about it. I knew I had to come back, you know. That was the first time. And then with these guys, wow. And then my senior year, after we graduated, the band I was singing with got a gig in the Thousand Islands up on the Russian River. It was a steakhouse. And I waited until 10 o'clock. I waited tables, and then I sang with them. So my last table was like, oh, that's our waitress. You know, I sang, you know. So it's like, then I had to make a decision. No, actually, that was, I don't know if that was the last year. No, maybe it was. I'm a little confused, because I also did in my junior year, I went and waited tables in the Jersey Shore. Those big hotels, you know, the Monmouth and the Spring Lake, New Jersey.
Oh, you were in Spring Lake in the 50s?
Yeah, it must have been, I honestly can't remember. It might have been after we did that steakhouse the next year, the next summer. Oh yeah, I had the waitress thing on and everything with the hat, you know, and we lived in it. Oh, God. But again, music was there. I made a show for them. I mean, I don't know. But anyway, I just remember I had to make a decision. I said, well, I knew I wasn't going to go back to Youngstown. It wasn't enough. Although, okay, here's another coincidence. One of my girlfriends from junior high, we used to hang out a lot, married a jazz bass player. What are the chances of that? So even before I went to college, I was sitting in with him at this hotel. But he was real. He knew the shit, he knew it. And so I was in it. It was it. But I didn't go around saying I was going to sing jazz. I didn't really know I was going to be a jazz singer. I was just following the music. Then I went to school, and then I did get in a band, with this band. But anyway, so I was either going to go to California or New York. And I went to the right place. And I didn't know anybody. So that's why I knew that they were all playing there. Miles, Monk, Mingus, Eric Dolphy. Anyway, it's like one thing kept leading to the other, but the main thing was I had to be there. How could I not? I knew I had to follow the music. That's all I knew. I didn't know,
And you come to New York at an incredible time because everything is exploding and creativity is everywhere and all the different innovations in art are happening and music. Tell me about the 60s in New York.
Well, the thing is that it was 63 was when I actually ended up moving there. And I didn't even know where I was going. I had one girlfriend from that same era of junior high. There was one friend in Ohio, Youngstown, Ohio, she was very much into reading and publishing, and she was a smart one. And her uncle lived in New York, so she did move to New York. She said, if you come, stay with me for 2 weeks, and we look for a place. Can you imagine? I'm a little girl from Ohio. So how I had the courage to do, I never went any place myself, So I did have, and then there was one classical singer in at college that I knew she was there because I didn't find a place in 2 weeks, and she had found a place. The three of us stayed. So there I was, I just had, and I worked office temps. I didn't want to teach because there was too much responsibility. You know what I mean? So I worked office temps, and I found the places. And again, at the I don't know if I've written much about this. I got a lot of biography things or interviews. But when I got there, I knew where to go. Monk was playing at the five spot. Train was playing at the half note, all those, they were just every week. It was so great.
What train did you see? What train did you see?
Which Coltrane?
Yeah.
Well, he was there with, the first time, I'll go back a step. The first time I heard John Coltrane live, he was in Cincinnati. Now, we were not far from Cincinnati. And by that time I knew, and everybody was saying, oh, John Coltrane's, and like, I lived in a dorm. In other words, it wasn't like I was, Bob, let's go, but I played hooky. If they'd have had a fire drill, I'd have been in trouble, and we found a couple of the guys, we found a place to stay, and we heard him in Dayton. We went to, it was Dayton, Ohio. I think, no, I can't remember. It was a little club, must have been Cincinnati. And that was the Favorite Things group, Jimmy Garrison. And
wow.
Yeah. Oh my God. No, but when I got to New York, then he was playing at the half note. I'm talking about hour solos. People don't know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about he played for a long solo, not just an hour set, And so that's a big influence for me. So anyway, I have to talk fast because the 60s was very important time. Yeah.
Well, the loft scene alone, I'd love to hear you talk about that.
Well, and there should be more written about this. I had one of the first ones, but I don't get that, I really did. I was doing office temps, I remember, and one of my gigs was, there was a woman from Holland, she was a visual artist. And you're talking, I was putting the account number on checks and putting in a little cubby hole or whatever, And she lived on Lispenard Street, below Canal. You know what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
right? Nothing, but that was all factory stuff.
At that point, yeah.
Nothing. And she invited me to her loft for dinner. And she was with another visual artist. Oh my God. They got stuff from Chinatown. They had a hot plate. I mean, it was pretty rustic, but it was 1,000 square feet. And I thought, oh my God, you could play at night here. You know what I mean? There were only 4 lofts in that building. It was right, Lispenard, right below West Broadway, Lispenard Canal. And of course, here goes another coincidence. Another month later, she called me, said, there's a loft available in that building, $80 a month. $80. Now, it didn't have heat. It did have a toilet. I mean, it was $80 a month, 1,000 square feet. So I took it. Mm-hmm. I don't know how I did. And I had another, I was living on the Upper West Side at that time. By that time, I had one roommate. It was, up on 74th, around the Boat Basin place,
Yeah.
And so I said, let's go look at this loft. And we took the loft together, and must have been spring or something, it was summer or something, because then finally in the heat, I had to get a space heater and everything. But the point being, I could do music there. I started having sessions there in the lofts, and nobody lived around there. I didn't know who was around there,
So who would some of the sessions be?
So then, I'm going to forget the name, but, Sam Rivers, Cecil McBee, Joanne Brackeen, Pete Yellen, Bob Moses, Gene Lee. These are all people that ended up playing in my loft. And at some point, I decided to present concerts in my loft, because where was I going to work? Nobody would get me. I mean, I wasn't anybody. I was Jay Collintone. So I did. But that was right around the time of the free thing, So all the saxophones and stuff. Gene Lee was the other singer. I met Gene Lee. There's so many stories. I can't remember if I met Gene Lee through Ran or Ran Blake through Gene Lee, but I think I met Gene Lee through Ran Blake. So he was another one of the first people I sang free with, because she went to Europe. Hey, well, let's just play, And so anyway, there was these. All of a sudden, that Don Cherry and all these guys, let's forget about reading music. And I had a loft so I could have the sessions. Who is the saxophonist? I'm losing his name. Young. He died in a car accident, and he played with Train. He played with. Oh God, I'll think of it in a minute. Anyway, right next door there was somebody they were playing. Free Life Communication was another one, the Dave Liebman, and then Bob Moses. That was another whole thing. We would go there and do sessions there.
Right, so Liebman had his loft over there as well.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of chronologically what came first, the chicken or the, because some of the early people I played with was Mark Whitecage and Perry Robinson, that whole thing. And again, it would be in someone's, someplace where you could play. I haven't got it straight about the decades, like what happened in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and I'm trying to archive a little, and then I give up. Every few years I give up.
Well, one name I saw that you had worked with, which really fascinated me, was the tenor saxophonist John Gilmore.
John Gilmore?
Yeah.
Well, he's the one that played with Sun Ra, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't play with him that much, but he might have played in my loft, I actually made flyers and everything, I mean, we just did the whole thing. And there was that whole loft thing.
Well, there was Studio Rivby, there was Ornette's loft on Rivington.
Right. But the thing is that, and I saw that they did some kind of article. I don't know why it wasn't mentioned so much, because I'm going to be honest with you. Sam Rivers played in my loft. So his was later, Sam. Then there was Enron. I used to produce concerts at Enron also. I don't know if you know, it was a huge loft. And it's interesting because the Brubeck the sons of Dave, they had a loft behind the performance space. And they actually, I really should get in touch with them and thank them. They really helped pay the rent for that. Isn't that interesting though? I mean, that music, if, you know, I don't remember them playing free or so much or anything, but they were so supportive.
I think they were pretty open. Another loft that was big for me, which is later though, in the 70s into the early 80s, was Soundscape, Verna Gillis.
Right, right. But did she actually have a space?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. She produced outside of the space, but she had a space on 52nd Street called Soundscape.
Yeah, I just remember that as her company, but I didn't know. Yeah.
And we would walk up, I think it was the 5th floor, and we would walk up the stairs and we could see Sun Ra there. I remember seeing Donald Eiler there. We could see Andrew Cyril and his projects, Ronald Shannon Jackson.
Oh, God.
You know,
yeah.
so many great projects there. And then, of course, she was doing stuff at Public Theater and other places.
Right. Oh, yeah. No, the other thing that was significant for me was, and not talk about sitting in, I had so much nerve. I tell my students, now we have open mics, I present them in, I mean, it's a little easier now. I'm talking about, I would have to ask big name, you know, can I sit in? The reason I did it wasn't so much to be famous or anything. I didn't think they were going to hire me. It was to find out how I was doing. How was I? Could I actually get there and do my thing without,
Could you hang?
You know, it's scary. So there was a place, maybe you know about the electric company, oh God, across the street from the 5 spot was a little club where the soprano saxophonist, tall saxophonist who, oh Jesus, it's just my memory.
Tony.
He's tall. He ended up moving to Rome. He played soprano sax. I'll think of it in a minute. And he had a session there, real late, you know. And I remembered when Jack DeJohnette, he might be even a couple years younger than me, you know, but he came to town around the same time, and I would sit there till 2 a.m. Oh, Tony, oh God. It just went right from my mind. It'll come up. You'll know who I'm talking about.
Who else did you work with?
Jackie Byard was on the piano, you know, and I think George Mraz was around that time. I mean, it was great. But I asked to sit in, but of course he would hit on me first. Mm. Then that was the hard part, you know, being a young in that time. But I don't care. I waited till 2 and I went and sang, and for me, it was significant, you know. I did sing. And if they asked me to do another tune, I knew it was cool, and they did, and they did. So I mean, I was serious, you know what I mean. I found every possible place to sit in, even if it wasn't jazz. You know, they had cabaret places or piano bar, you know, anything to just do my thing, you know. But I mean, I just thought of that because it was so. It was such a great thing, you know, down around there, you know.
How important was Steve Lacy for you?
Well, he was. In other words, he wasn't in the. My story is that I had the nerve to call him up on the phone. Now I'm telling you, I only saw them that one time before I graduated at that place. But there was something, because the reason I called him was I didn't know who, I wanted to find the local places. In other words, I knew I could go hear Monk and them, but I knew there had to be places where I could meet other musicians that were my closer to me. And so, did you meet Steve? Do you know Steve? Did you know him?
I did meet him while he was in New York, but didn't know him, no.
Yeah, he in other words, it's not like he's Mr. Outgoing. He wasn't that approachable, you know what I mean? Not mean or anything, but Steve was serious, you know. But I I looked it up in the phone book. I can't believe I did this because I wanted to know if he could tell me where I could go. Where was the hangs, not the big clubs. And he gave me the time of day. No, I said, I'm green. I'm just starting singing, blah, 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 blah. And so um, he, how did this happen? Oh, yeah. His bass player, Louis Worrell, did you
Mhm.
know that name
I
hardly?
do.
And he disappeared. Oh, he did. Louis had a crush on me, I know, but whatever. I did. But that Louis Worrell played with Mark Levin, who was and I don't know if you know that name. He worked with, he studied with Bill Dixon. He was one of those free players. Yeah. And Mark Levin had a band, and Louis was in that band, and Carlos Scott, who played the cello hanging around his neck. And so Mark said they had a gig because it was around the war in Vietnam, and they had some kind of benefit concert. And Mark had his band. They were playing a lot of free jazz, but there was a trio next. And so Louis said, and they were looking for a singer to sing with the trio, and Louis recommended me. So one thing leads to another, because he knew. So and that trio was my age. They were cool. They lived on the Lower East Side. I used to go jam with them, that. So one thing led to the other. And Steve, I would go here, Steve. I never really, really played with Steve, because but he's the one, like, I would hang out with them to go to the 5 spot. He showed me where the instrumentalists would be there. They didn't have to pay the cover.
Right.
It was hard, and I wouldn't get hit on. But then he moved to Paris. You see, it was very short-lived, but it was just enough that I hooked up on the scene, And he is a mentor to me, because I later produced that. He did a solo record years later at Enveron. I produced that. He couldn't get the time of day. He was living in Paris. He couldn't work in New York. It was very hard for Steve. You remember that? Yeah, they went to Europe because he couldn't get a gig, with that original music that he had. So one time he came to New York, and I honestly, I did the flyers, I did everything. He did a solo concert at Enveron. It was beautiful. So musically, he's a mentor to me. I consider him a mentor. It was like, I don't know, but then I saw he and his wife in Paris years later. But yeah, that was the major thing for me, And then one thing led to another. The other story is my Pookie Pub story. I don't know if you.
Okay.
And again, the half note. I decided at some point, I had my loft and I did those sessions, everything, blah, blah, blah. And I would do the concerts. Sometimes it was all standard. Sometimes it was free, totally free. I mean, Lieb will tell you that. In other words, now I have found structures, and from my music, in other words, I'm into both. That's it. This last thing that I sent you, the 3 for the Road, Ed Neumeister, we're on the same page, I'm telling you.
I loved it. It's a great trio.
Did I send you the concert, the actual concert, the link? I might have.
Yes, and the trio with
Versace.
Versace, yeah.
Yeah, he's great. So we just start. But I'm saying it could go in either way, standards and not.
You seem to work really beautifully with trombonists. Why is that?
I don't know. I worked. You name them. I worked with Julian Priester. Have you got that?
Yeah. Julian Priester, Versace, yeah.
I worked with so many. You name them. Roswell. I had a couple gigs with Roswell. And I forgot his name. There was another one in New York. I don't know. I do work well with them, but why did they come into my life? Why was it trombone? I don't know.
It's a very vocal instrument, I think.
How about Marty Cook?
Marty Cook, yeah.
I was in his band, the New York Jazz Explosion or something. We used to play at Jolie Wilson's The Ladies' Fort. And we probably did Rivby. Yeah, I don't know.
Jay, you strike me as having this quality that I see in so many of the elder states folk that I get to chat with. You're not conservative about genre or approach. You're not snobby. Free is as good as standards. Standards are as good as classical, and everything is sort of a piece. is that part of your upbringing? Is that just something? I mean, obviously you bolted out of Ohio to come to New York. Is that just your frame of mind? Is that everything is musical? What is it?
No, I think it's a couple of things. One of the key things is the improvisational aspect of everything, because to me, and even singing free, when you're improvising, whether it's over or changes or if it's free, you are influenced by what you heard in your whole life, everything. I think what drove me was I was so curious about what the voice could do besides the function of singing a song, which I still love. Somebody asked me to do a whole workshop on Friday. She's in Montreal. They're doing it, on text and the words and the meaning. And because I'm so into that, whether you're singing free or not, form follows function, message is everything to me, whether you're singing with words or without words, feeling. And so I guess that's why, I have early John Cage recordings. I did early John Cage. Why did I sing with Steve Reich, and there was no improv. I mean, I couldn't just do that because, yeah.
You're jumping ahead there, but I did want to talk about that. How did you fall in with Steve Reich?
Well, because Joan LaBarbera, who...
I know her well, yes.
She studied jazz with me.
Ah.
LaBarbera was from Peter LaBarbera. She was married to Peter LaBarbera, and I knew him, with that. I played with him. She actually studied the standards with me. It was short-lived because that's not where she lives. She's into that extended technique and everything. So she knew, I have to ask her, I don't know how she met Steve, but she told me one day, Steve Reich is looking for a jazz singer who could read. In other words, he didn't want a classical sounding voice. So that makes sense when you know his music.
Yes.
Well, guess what? He lived a block away from me. Who would have known? He was on Broadway. I was a Lisp Bernard, was that short, thing. Mm-hmm. And she invited me. He was writing drumming.
Right.
He was in the middle. He had just the first whole section, which that was I forget, but there's that one section where we singers sing the resultant patterns,
mm-hmm.
And so we chose them together. So it was Joan and, again, I see her face, and there's the other singer that was in the original one. You have to look it up. And that's how it happened, there were three of us, and he would play it, and then we'd hear that melody, and then we decided on the melodies that we would sing. But once again, I was singing clarinet parts, percussive kind of things, everything written, no improv.
But I'm wondering about tone, because when I listened to those recordings, and I listened to them early, I was at 18 Musicians at the premiere as a high school student.
Oh, wow.
That's how far back I go with Steve Reich Musicians performing premieres in New York. I was at the premiere of Tehillim. So, put that all out on the table. But I'm interested in the sounds and the shapes of the sounds that the vocalists are making in pieces like Mallet Instruments, Voices and Organ, and 18 Musicians. What is Steve saying to you? What are you doing with the notes? I know it's all written out, but how are you approaching it as a vocal artist?
Well, see, that's interesting for me. In retrospect, and I hadn't thought about it till you asked, one of the things that through jazz was I worked at trombone, and I always worked with instrumental horn players, and I would double lines with them. And I teach this too, because my students are always say, well, what syllables? Well, I didn't decide any of that. I blended with them. So in other words, I don't know. Do, 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 do. I can go do, 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 do. These are like, if you isolate my part of Steve Reich, you got nothing. You got do, 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 But so that was one of my strengths that nobody would know. But I mean, that he didn't, we didn't decide. It was through the process, because he was actually still writing the piece. Yeah. And
like on music for Mallet Instruments, Voices and Organ, it almost sounds like you guys are like water harps or there's some sort of water sound going on in
The
there. And that
vocals
was,
thing? Yeah.
yeah, the vocals.
And I'll tell you, that was the only piece that if there was, see, it's gamelan music on yeah. In other words, it's not about soloists and all this. Right. I had a hard time at first because those, in any of them, those are great vamps to solo over. You know, I mean, it wasn't appropriate. It took me a minute to understand the thing. But at first, like, oh man, I could just really play on those. But I got it. I was.
Were they tough stamina wise?
Did what?
That was the repetition tough stamina wise.
See, I don't think there aren't that many singers. You can't just get a sub for that stuff.
Right.
It was, and then especially, was it 18? Yeah. Woo. Then it was high too, and over. So we had to figure that out, you know, and we did. But
so you figured it out in terms of breath, as far as how many times things could be repeated, or what was breathing like in that situation?
Well, it's just short. Everything. There were never really long phrases, but the how to repeat it. We just did it by, you know. And you're right. I don't think any singer could just do that. It's like you learn how to make it easy because doesn't require that much breath really. Except for those very high ones.
And you're amplified.
And we were amplified, so we just touch it. Yeah, absolutely. That was a very important part of it. And that's what I mean. It wasn't classical production. That's not what that conceptually that wouldn't have worked. He's right, you know. And the interesting thing about the one freedom I had in that voices, organ, mallet instruments or whatever, was that I determined when it was enough. In other words, I actually had a little, you know, I would do it if, you know, do this.
It's like open repeat.
And then I look over to Jim Price, he had the cue. He played the cue to move on to the next section. But he was looking at me, you know, and then I would back off. And that was fun. And that piece was fun for me because some of the patterns I found this stuff. I didn't want to stick out, but it also had a little presence, you know. So I do remember that one. Yeah, that was cool.
The blending of the instruments and the voices in that is really spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I truthfully have not listened to that music much. I only listened from the inside, you know, and a couple of times that I listened, it's completely different. Talk about music for 18 musicians. I mean, listening as you're doing it and listening like this, the result is two different things. Well, you listen like this. Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I heard things I could never hear while I was doing it, actually.
That's fascinating. Also fascinating to me is the beginning of that music. You know, Philip Glass is doing his thing involving a kind of repetitive and minimal amounts of material. Steve is more interested in the Eastern and the African influence on what he can do. Lamont Young obviously is important in all of that. But what is the reception to that music? Can you take us to that time period where people are starting to hear Steve Reich and minimalism for the first time in that scene?
I'm going to tell you straight out, on or off the books, I never could understand. And there, you know, I never was on the outside, just what we're talking about. I thought, oh my God, who's going to listen? You know, how could you listen to some of it? Was hard to listen to, you know, but there's an audience. And Steve Reich, he figured it out. And he figured it out. He got sponsors from the get-go. People who would put money into his music so we could even rehearse. And then he went to museum, you know, we did galleries, museums, not any, you know, it's so I'm still, I mean, I have a lot of respect for him. I think it's beautiful music. It's for minimal music, you know, but how he did it, you tell me, who were those people that really dig it? Who are they now? They do. And I never, especially we were and musicians. We're the and musicians, right? Right. Nobody played it. And now Now if people are playing, and it's colleges. You see, I thought, who is gonna? It was the music that only the composer does, you know. But
I
no,
remember actually when it was frowned upon in academia.
it had to be. It was like, what is this? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
But
now, as you say, it's performed by students around the world. Uh, you know, but that was also true of Morton Feldman's music.
yeah, yeah.
People
Because
heard it and they thought, you know, what is this? It's so repetitive. What's the point? And now people view it as beautiful art.
yeah, but that's true for any new thing, and even the free music. I mean, getting back to the jazz stuff, it's like we played for very small audiences.
Yeah, Liebman told me that people, as much as we revere the free period now and we have so much more perspective on it, at the time it was tough on the audience.
Yeah, the diehards were there, and I was just telling some of my, because I, you know, in my teaching, I I teach so-called free music. In other words, you don't find it in the colleges. When I was at Cornish College for 20 years, you know, talk about, you know, stellar, Jerry Granelli, Gary Peacock, Julian Priester, you know, I had an ensemble, a free ensemble. And I feel that it should be more in the jazz history, because where do we, and same with Dave, doesn't mean that everything is free, but I stuck with it. I still have you saw, a lot of that is free. The duo thing with Granelli.
So great.
We just went in and did it. But that's because we continue to do it, you know, but I think it's very important because that's where you find stuff.
Well, isn't there?
You're a composer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And an improviser. And so I would say this, when I heard your Granelli project, your duo with Jerry Granelli, and he's always been one of my favorite percussionists. You know, as a percussionist, we all admire him, his ingenuity, his groove, all of these things that are in that one player, you know, sort of similar in a way to Jack DeJohnette, where, you know, you're going to get everything that you need, whether it's free or whether it's a ballad or whatever it is. So this thing with you and Jerry is a thing that I've tried to always do in my duets with Derek Bailey or with Paul Smoker, is that you limit what you do so that you almost are kind of like creating a thematic space, but you can still be free within that. And so each of those pieces with you and Jerry were kind of like a different room or a different universe. And that to me is the most creative type.
In improv in general, it happens even in soloing. But the point is, with Granelli and I, we met at Naropa Institute because, you know, Oregon, the whole group Oregon was teaching there. And finally I just got invited there. And the first Granelli had heard me. I had not actually heard him, you know, but he knew, he must have known who I so-called was, you know. And I wasn't there 3 days, and he said, do you want to do a concert with me and Colin Walcott? Period. 2 percussionists and me in a sanitarium. That planetarium. That was a little slip. You have to be crazy.
It would have worked either way.
You knew what I meant. It was that crazy. But my point is that because we are like-minded, we were totally into that free. He trusted me. He completely trusted me. And even do you have the first duo thing is called Sound Songs? I don't know if you have that. Maybe you do.
I don't know that one. No.
That was 20, 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. And it was one of the early digital recordings. It was, you know, on a video thing, and it was in a place where they do video, you know. And when you hear that, and you must hear that, I have to somehow, I don't have a link, but I don't know how to do that, but you must hear the original one too. It sounds like a bunch of pieces. They're not, except for Goodbye Pork Pie Hat. I did that one on the first one, and I did a poem, I think, Emily Dickinson, which wasn't written. I mean, it wasn't anything. But my point is that just what you described, well, you're a musician. And this is true now because I have, you know, Vocal Summit, you know, vocal free pieces. I kept writing them in workshops. But what you said is exactly what's happening. And it's the same with soloing. They all have a different character. They're all different points of departure. So it's not like a rule. You can't improvise this way on this, but you do. whatever is written evokes a certain kind of improv. And I'm so into that. I love that. Or not. And some people sing or play free no matter what the tune is, but it's not. It's evokes a certain space kind of thing. It could be, angular. It could be, even harmonic is the hardest one, of course.
But how about lyrically free? How does that work for you?
You mean words, text?
Word choice in free settings.
Well, that's an interesting thing too, because I, for a long time, I didn't. Jean Lee was the, she wrote poetry and she did it a whole different thing than me.
Tell me about Jean Lee. She's such a great
I still dedicate. Do you have my solo CD? If you don't, I'm going to sing.
I don't, but I know it. Yeah.
You know about the Piece of Wild Things, but I actually do one of her things on there and I dedicate that to her because she was such a free spirit. I mean, her last child was, because I had my son is now, going to be 50 and I had him and then she got eyes to be pregnant. That's how close we were,
Oh. But
Jean was even more spacey than me, but the operative thing was Jean Lee. She had her rhythmic thing and she was into movement too. And one of the very first, because people would ask me to teach and I'm like, you can't teach this. You just got to go, I didn't have a teacher, just listen to the music. But then I kept their names in the first, actually one of the early ones, she and I did together, a workshop. And it was free. I don't remember what we did, but we had so I started making up these points of departure. In other words, you can just say, and I still do that. I'll just say, sing free now just for 1 minute. I think everybody should start all of their instrumentals of all their practice period, just sing free for 2 minutes, play free, don't even think. And that's what I think can be missing because we got to do that because that's what we were doing, but in schools you don't. So I actually had a free ensemble and we would have times when we were just like we were in the lofts. And he's rightly, it's like, but guess what? The diehard, the audience that came, they knew that at any moment, something fantastic could happen out of something you couldn't compose, and that's why I feel very sad in a way that we don't have recordings of a lot of that stuff. But that's what's after, and the more you do it, the more of a composer you become. So, and together when it's long, something went on long enough. Space.
It's collaborative composition, isn't it? It's spontaneous.
It's collective composition. We call it collective composition. That's a new, you're making a piece together, and you can't describe it. So I throw them in, just sing. And it's amazing. And at first they may be conscientious. I also do a thing. I don't know if you have my book. I wrote a book called Sing Your Story. I don't have any here. I'd send it to you. It's for teaching and learning the art of jazz singing, but there's a little free section in it, because I started to write structures, points of departure. My most
famous. What would those be, Jay? What would those be?
Like 410-2 is the one I was thinking of it. It's a piece called and Fortune Cookie. Do you know about Fortune Cookies so I've recorded that. Do you know about quartet? When Peacock and Priester and Grinelli and I, we did, it's called No Secrets.
Yes.
I wrote Fortune, it's in my book. It's notated, rhythmically notated, but there's no pitches. There's little X's for the notes, which I like that. In other words, I don't want to do a lot of reading, but I do want structure, So I wrote that for quartet. I actually got a grant, get me a grant while you're up. I actually did get in before now they don't do it. It was a performance, NEA. And so that's what I mean, that structure. So and you know why I wrote that? So I could, because I wanted to just solo better on a fast walking bass, like Charlie Hayden, Dave Hall, free bop. It's free bop, it swings. And so for me, the ingredients that I do require for myself, that if a like-minded person is swinging, I don't care if it's free or not. Free does not mean crazy.
Right. And
Means
that's super
talking
important.
on this spot.
Sorry, say one more time.
It doesn't mean weird. It doesn't have to be so out. And people who don't play free much, they love doing it with me. But that's the first thing they're going to do is, you know,
Right.
don't get me wrong. I do that if it's evoked, you know. And there's a thing on Quartet, the No Secrets CD, that it's Peacock and Priester. It sounds like a ballad. It's totally free. They were able to do that harmonic thing together. That's hard, you know, the harmony.
I had that experience with George Garzone and John Lockwood.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's totally free, but it's a tune.
Because you're listening, you have everything, and you've heard a lot of stuff. Yeah, that's the hardest one, but I'm fascinated by it.
And we recently lost Gary Peacock. Can you tell us a few things about Gary?
Well, I was scared to death of Gary Peacock. I heard Gary Peacock with Miles at the Vanguard, so I knew. And then I go out to Cornish. They invited me to teach at Cornish College, you know, and like, ugh. So fortunately, because you know we all have people who kind of, oh my God, you know. And he was known for that, though. I don't know. Did you know Gary?
I did.
He's a sweetheart, but he was a toughie. That was, you know.
I had a good experience. I did his oral history for Yale, oral history of American music, and he gave me a lot of time, and it was great.
Yeah, no, he is. But he did have a reputation of being kind of tough, you know. I mean, so fortunately, before I went to teach at Cornish, I turned it down at first. I'm like, what do you mean, leave New York City? I'd never even been in Seattle. So I said, well, just, why don't you make a little 10-day tour or something, and I'll teach out there and maybe make some gigs, and then I'll see, you know. Anyway, they did, and Art Landy was there too. He and I, like, we can do a concert tomorrow. Boom, just do it, you know. And he was out there. So there's my band, you know, Gary Peacock, Julian Priester, Art Landy, Jerry Granelli. I mean, come on, what better band? They made 3 or 4 concerts. And so, but before our concerts, Peacock was at Jazz Alley with somebody. It might have been Stanley Cow. I don't know. He's another one. Oh, I love Stanley. Work with him. They asked me to sit in. This is before our gigs, thank God. And I think I did You Don't Know What Love Is. And I got a little out of Peacock. You know how there's a little jazz sound. If you like something, you go, whatever it was. And that was it. I'm just telling you personally, that was like, okay, I think I can work with them now. I think he hears me, you know. So we did. I mean, we played together in quartet, you know, that's all I did, you know, we didn't. And I wasn't he died not so far from here, you know. He's up in the Hudson, whatever, upstate. The person that was more close to him was Peggy Stern, the piano player, you know. So a lot of times in the last few years, I would see him because he would go to her house. We'd have a little get together. But I really wasn't there when he died. But I know he was sick. You know,
he was sick. I have great memory of seeing him in a trio with Jerry Granelli and Ralph Towner.
Right.
And it was at Fat Tuesdays.
Oh, God, yeah.
It was probably 1980. And I remember seeing Jerry playing with chopsticks. And as a teenage percussionist, I thought that was very groovy.
Oh, yeah. We just have this thing. It's like for years. That was it. We can... And so what happened was, and I tell my people, like, they want to sing free. Well, you got to do it. So I do it. I do it even on Zoom. There's not much you can do, but it's like I have this 4-10-2, by the way, is it's just 4 long tones, 10 short tones, 2 long tones. And I say medium loud, not longest, but, you know, any pitch you want. And what happens is if you hear 3 people or 3 anythings doing it, it's this random stuff that happens.
And do you stick with your pitch? So you're holding against?
No, you don't think. Just do it independently. You're picking, you're choosing any pitch you want, you know. And the reason, and I don't remember when I invented this. It was years ago. It's like, why 4-10-2? How come 5-11? Whatever. It doesn't matter. And why I could say long tones and short tones. No. 4/10/2, it determines the length of the piece. But it could be forever. I could do 4/10/2 till I die. I just leave big spaces, but it doesn't. It kind of determines the length of the piece. And that's something that I do now. What I do, I discovered this stuff on, teaching on Zoom. Theoretically, we, like 3 or 4 of us do it and somebody's free over it. That's the whole idea. Or they do text. They can use text. You originally asked me about text. In the beginning, of this free stuff, I can remember, and Quartet was the one. There was a place in Seattle that we had a gig. It's probably the only time. Once in a while, I make up text. Now I'm using a lot of E.E. Cummings and Emily Dickinson and all that. I memorize them. I don't know when they're going to come out, But at that time I wrote, and this is a piece that's on Circle Dancing. I don't know if you have Circle Dancing. It's a CD with Jim Knapp and Brigham Krause and Greenelli, and I don't even think, no, it isn't even Greenelli. Anyway, you should have this. It's really got a lot of original stuff. But anyway, I was singing with Quartet Free, and out came Sometimes I wonder. It was the whole thing, and I made a solo piece out of it, which I'll send you sometime. You'll be so sick of me. You're going to be so sick of me.
Well, no, I'm not sick of you. I'm loving hearing these stories. And Jay, I'm so curious about your contact with John Cage and his music, because I know that there wasn't a lot of performance of his vocal music, and you're one of the first people, right?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you something. It was my first album, All Out. It's called Jay Clayton, All Out. The Heiner Stadler was a composer, and he loved, we don't say third stream, but third stream stuff, like a classical thing and a jazz thing. Anyway, Heiner Stadler wrote All Out. It's a free piece. It has some written. Jane and I will double this written stuff, and then it's totally little free sections. Anyway, but he's the one. He said he thought that Cage was not interested in recording it in those early years. He didn't care about recording.
Oh, wow.
So he wasn't a part of that project. But Heiner found his earlier pieces, which were tonally simple, but God, 5/4/7, yeah. And again, no improv,
Right.
So he wanted me to record. He actually, I think, you remember Lambert, Hendricks, and Ross, and then for a while was Lambert, Hendricks, and Bavon. What's her name? He had asked her originally, I think, and it wasn't. I don't think it's real conceptual, that stuff, that early stuff. It was called She's Asleep, and it had no words, and it was everything notated. Anyway, my point is, we weren't in touch with Cage. We just did it, and it was released. Now you fast forward. I'm teaching at Cornish, and of course there's a percussion group there, and all those wonderful things. They would present concerts, and so, I think it was his 70th birthday or something. he came out to Cornish, and this percussion ensemble said, "Jay, why don't you do?" She says, "Well, guess what? I never performed any of his music. I only recorded it. So I did it. And the only time I ever since performed it, he was in the audience." And he was cool. He liked it. I mean, oh my God, I was so nervous. It was all this, oh my God, I can't believe I did it.
But he was around, and I tell my students, he came to, when we did a festival of his music at Rutgers when I was a student in '82, he would be in the audience at Experimental Intermedia, or at the Alice Tully Hall. You would see Mr. Cage there. Did you ever see him at other concerts?
I think I saw one where he more in that chance thing with the shells and everything. Yeah. But here's what I think, the mystique of Cage, until he started to record. But even then, I know that more people knew who he was than ever heard his music. And in my career, I'm a little like that. I'll be honest with you. I got a reputation, but I who buys my now I think maybe now, who knows, maybe when I'm 90. But the point is even instrumental, I know a lot of instrumentalists and they want to play with me now. It's so great. I'm just telling you, I'm being honest with you. That's what carries me through. These guys really do, because we're on the same page, but say, oh, Jay Clayton, who's he? They'd heard my name. And Cage was like, I heard that name for years, but I never heard his music because it wasn't recorded, you see. So then Joan later, by the time Joan LaBarbera did his thing, he was into it by then, I think, What a mystique. What an interesting, well, you probably saw him more than me.
I may have, but I do know the mystique that you're referring to, and also saw it kind of a little broken down in terms of he did have a lot more interest in the performance outcome than he might have let on with, chance operations and the I Ching and all these things, and then trying to remove personality or choice. But then you're left with non-choice, which is still a choice. And then I guess, it becomes difficult to weed through that for me. So I'm a big fan of his notated music, but I found the verbal instruction pieces and the chance operation.
One of them where you each got a card or something, and then it was events, a bunch of events.
Events, yeah.
But his early stuff, and again, I recorded it. I want to say Virgo. I can't remember who put it out. It was very tonal, and even though it was no words. I just remember that all notated, but there was a certain you could be in that. In other words, it was definitely me. I wouldn't stick out, but I don't know. But it was, for me, it was like, how many people knew his name but never heard him until later on. Now he's recorded more,
And it's interesting to me because, there's all these different ways of people that were subverting outcomes of music, like free playing is not going to necessarily be harmonic. And verbal instruction process pieces aren't going to necessarily be rhythmic. So it's like all these things that are sort of being what you throw out, what you keep, and what it is that's structuring this activity.
Oh, it is fascinating. But this fortune cookie goes a long way. I'm going to send, well, I wish I had my book, but I might send you the score, and it's like, I once did a little, just what you're talking about. They asked me out in Seattle to do this little lecture thing about free music, and I would show them what was written, and then I'd play. And it was like, my God, it was like 10 minutes of music, but this one little nothing on there, So only improvisers could really do it. People who had composing skills, but could do it right on the spot.
To make it interesting, I think, or musical, you need musical people to insert themselves into these situations.
Yeah, they're not just interpreting notes. They are,
right.
They're part of the music. If you can't solo on a free ball, because that was, oh, you know what reminded me of it? There's no pitches, but if you get three people singing this, what I wrote rhythmically, random chords, they're beautiful chords.
Yeah.
So you'll see it, and it's on, of course, it's on No Secrets. I recorded it a couple of times, but I did it with singers. I do it, and it's a great thing to work on. In other words, and they have to go keep it in time. I figure, I just, in retrospect, I take a lot of this free stuff into workshops, and I go, what am I? They're going to make any money doing this? I mean, who's going to? There's a lot of basics you get from it. Is your time okay? Can you trade force? Where's the pulse? Did you hear that? And they jump in and do it. But you can only do, as far as soloing, if you haven't heard much jazz, it's going to be different, I just think listening is a huge, and you agree, I mean, because we both listen a lot. It's not, Todd Coleman, the bass player. Yeah. Well, who he is, but I mean, a lot of times I get little verbiage when I co-teach with people. I love the way, and he said, I use this all the time. I go, this is not a suggestion, listening is not optional. That's how
I say,
It's an oral music. You can, if you didn't hear swing, you're not going to swing, okay?
And also I say to students, I'm glad you have, you're practicing your technique, how your listening chops.
Hello. Say it again. Yeah. And in my book, I have a whole page that says, listen, listen. You know what I mean? I'm absolutely, it's like, and when I was at Cornish, it was 82 to 2002. So it must have been in the 80s. I don't remember when the internet, whatever. It was around that time. I was in Seattle. And I would have these classes, the singers would sing individually with the rhythm section. And they may say it would be something like all of you. And I go, I tell singers to listen to horn players. I tell horn players to listen to singers. But I said, well, have you heard Miles' version? And they go, no, the singer. And I go, well, guess what? In my school on Mars, if you tell me that, here's what I'll do. And I would go like this on the wall. And I said, it'll come out the speakers. I was serious. I was dead serious. And a few years later, I could have done that with my computer. You ever hear YouTube? Isn't that cool? I mean, for all whatever with the rights and getting paid or whatever, YouTube is, I go to YouTube a lot.
I know.
I'm telling you, because they were like, oh, I can't afford to buy this and I can't get the records and I can't afford, oh no. No. It's everything.
Well, people don't know what to listen to. They don't know what not to listen to. They have so many options now.
Yeah.
Jay, I wanted to ask you about something that I think you were an innovator in, and something that I know that you've been very involved in is vocal processing, both live and in recordings. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, because I know not many singers cotton to that.
Well, the thing is, it's not processing for me. It's because it's looping. It's more looping for me.
Okay.
So here's how it started. And this
I've heard you do pitch things also, no?
Nope. But I do it live. I have some things that I save. Like I have a whole piece, and this is interesting. This is the. I have a piece called 7/8 Thing that you know what? If you YouTube me, I think somebody put that on there. And I think it was influenced from Reich. Okay, I wrote it around the time I was with Steve Reich. Mm-hmm. In the second place, a lot of times I write things just like when I wrote Fortune Cookie, I write things with things I want to work on. So, his is all odd meter, 3s and 2s, and there's no real bars and everything. So I wrote a piece in 7/8. It has an ostinato, and I wrote melodies over it, except mine always has improv sections, the things to improvise over, So, okay, I can't remember where I was going with this.
Electronics.
Yeah, so, and it's not electronics, but that little ostinato, I got somebody to make, it's either they did it electronic or whatever. It's this wonderful ostinato that I put it in my loop station. So why do I do a loop station? Greenelli had, he used it with his drums. He doesn't do much anymore. He was one of the early ones. And he kept saying, I had this little keyboard and I said, I don't want this. I thought I would use this. I'm going to go to the music store. He said, why don't you get something electronic, So what you're saying, processing, my first thing was a chorus pedal.
Right.
Blue pedal. So it does do something with your voice.
Well, you have like parallel lines that go with it, right? Well,
it just changes. The way I used it was, I didn't care about I also ended up with the harmonizer, which I
guess that's what I mean. Yeah.
But the first one I got just kind of put a little edge on your voice, a chorus. So it was a chorus. I mean, there were other sounds, but it didn't necessarily sound C, E, G, or whatever. Anything.
It was a color.
It was a color, and like I would use it, like I'd be soloing, and then I hit it. And so that escalated the sound of the solo. That's how I used it. Everybody uses them different. But then he kept talking to me about the digital delays, So I borrowed one. It had 2 seconds. that's it. And that became too obvious, Then I got the next one was the Jam Man. No, I forget what it was, but it had 4 seconds. Boop, boop, it was I wanted longer. And then finally, then there was one that had 16, and then the Jam Man was like, forget it, So I have the loop station now. But I mostly use it live it becomes, as opposed to, I make pieces. That's why I've got to send you this solo piece. The solo CD is just me, but I use my electronics. So you don't know what's going on. And this piece, this first text that I did, sometimes I wonder, I also had a 4-track. Before I had the delay, I had a 4-track cassette thing. And I still have this. I made this thing. It was ended up being kind of a drone, but it had fifths in it, and then I would improvise over it. I still have it to this day. I got it in my machine, made it on a cassette thing, So that I have saved, so that might pop out at any time. And this ostinato 7/8 thing, but it's definitely Steve Reich related, right? These little melodies that I wrote, but over the ostinato, So anyway, I'm blabbing on, but composition. But once again, now I might do a concert and I may do a standard. The next thing is totally free. The next thing comes this. That's more like world music. But was I looking to make world music? No, it's what I heard. It's what I was, if I was listening to that stuff, then it comes out and you're playing,
I agree that we're just sort of synthesizing everything that we've experienced and everything that we loved and all the sounds that we grew up with and even the things that are we're getting turned on to now. But I've noticed this trend in your work, and especially recordings of multiple Jay Clayton voices. And one project in particular that I just was knocked out by was you and Kirk Nurok did settings of the Emily Dickinson poetry. And it's just such a special recording. And I told Kirk, I just absolutely adore it. Could you talk a little bit about that project? Because I think it's just something people have to hear.
And they won't he was the magician in that in the end. He was the magician. So what we did was Kirk and I go way back, and nothing ever came. He's very particular, by the way, about everything. So just know that. He wouldn't mind my saying it. Just keep it off the books. I'm talking about, so I know. For 40 years, whatever, we've been playing together. You know how I met him? I didn't know. It was because I was doing these vocal things, like free, and I did a thing for WBAI. But anyway, one of my fellow musicians called me up one day. They said, turn on WBAI, turn on the radio. And he was doing his natural sound stuff. You know about that, right?
Yes.
And they said, and I'm more coming from jazz improv, but I was doing similar things with a cappella voices, but it was more in the jazz, he was using non-singers actually to do that. And so I called him up and I said, we might have something in common. I didn't know he even played piano. And he lived in a loft. He was in Chelsea. I was in, and so I went over there. I told him about my vocal pieces, and I really liked it. And then I said, this grand piano. He said, let's just play something. And we just did free. So we had that. We could do that. He's one of the few people. But he also is a composer. So, he has all this other stuff. Anyway, short story long, we recorded some very free playing in his little apartment. And then, of course, he had these beautiful songs. He put they're like art songs to the actual poetry. So there was both of it. And we recorded some of that. Now, what are we going to do with this? It's where do they meet? The songs are like, art songs. And the other stuff is, let it go. I'm nobody, whatever. So to his credit, and this was for a few years we had this. What are we going to, should we put out 2 different things? One is totally free and one is, and he took that stuff and put it in GarageBand. and made. So he made those pieces. It's me, you know, he didn't do anything to my voice and stuff, but what you heard was his combining somehow made that work, didn't it?
It's beautifully arranged, yeah.
Yeah, and then we had to go, what's first, what's second? Oh my God, we went back and forth for a long time and finally made that sequence. And I do think it's a piece of art, I really do. But it's his final putting it together of all the stuff that we did organically, you know. And wow, isn't that, I'm so glad you have that, you know.
Yeah, it's a special piece. And she's important as a poet, isn't she?
Yeah, well, the first time, well, no, there's two, E. E. Cummings and her. The first time I got comfortable, you know, I loved text, but I didn't want to contrive it. There's one thing in the 60s, there were a lot of bongos and poetry, you know, all that stuff. And I'm sure I did it. But I found that a lot of it to me didn't work. It was like using the sounds of those words, but I need the meaning to come through. So I have to, you know, so I started to memorize Emily and E. E. Cummings, some things, and it was better if they were short, that you got the message, then you could fool around whatever, you know what we're talking about. And the first time that I felt good about it was in a workshop with Greenelli in Halifax, where we were playing free, and I said, I did the E. E. Cummings, Let It Go. And I knew it when it popped. I didn't plan it. Let it go. And I knew that I finally got it. I was behind it. I was connected. And he noticed. Later on, he said, wow, that really worked. You see, what does it mean worked? Work, that's personal if it worked or not. But I knew what he was talking about. So what I tell singers, because a lot of singers are using text, but they're reading it or they're not, or they say they distort the word so much. I don't know what if I don't get the message, and that's me, and that's a personal thing. I don't care if I don't get the message, I don't know, you lose me, you know. So it has to be clear, and I use that in workshops, even singing the standards. They're singing, they think that they think we're hearing their things, but they're not behind it. And the best compliment I ever got was I was actually at a real session years ago with Jack Wilkins, who I worked with a lot on guitar, and Mark Copeland and somebody else. We were just somebody's house. And I did Autumn Leaves. And after I like soloing on, of course, you use that a lot. That's harmonically friendly. But the truth is, the best compliment was Jack Wilkins said, wow, Jay, I have played that with singers and everything, a million times. This is the first time I heard the lyrics, Autumn Leaves. And so all my singers work on it, but I said, but don't use, because I was like that at first. I have to admit, in the early years of free music and standards, and some standards, oh, that's corny. Well, guess what? Then you can't sing it if you think that. You see what I'm saying? But I thought too, I'll just use those words for articulation, you know. No, you can't do it. You won't get past me. You won't get past me. I won't believe you. I have to believe you. I don't care if it's folk or whatever kind, you know. So that's
interesting. That's interesting too, because I know that from talking to the drummer Louis Hayes, that saxophonists like Dexter Gordon insisted that they would sing the lyrics and know the lyrics of all of those songs to play them on the saxophone.
He's the one that said, he stopped playing. He's the one. He stopped playing, and they said, "What happened?" He said, "I forgot the lyrics." No, but I mean, it's a good example.
That's
I
a
use
great
that
example.
with my student because it's like, and you can tell. I mean, you know, like Bill Evans. God, I mean, Jesus, I always wanted to sing with Bill Evans. That's just unfair. But anyway, he even the ballad, how instrumentalists treat certain songs. It doesn't mean you can't do you can't, like Miles, you mean it might be fast, but it's sad. And I don't mean that, but I can kind of tell if they know the lyrics. And especially if you're working with the singer, you know, the good players that work with, who like singers, I mean, might not even like a singer, but when they work with me, you can tell. You know, you can't do rubato without knowing what's going on, you know. But isn't that cool about yeah, Greenelli knows a lot of songs.
Yeah.
We kid around, but it is interesting. Even if you don't know all the lyrics, you have to know what is it about.
Well, phraseology also comes into play, right? Because the idea of the first lyric being completed, breath, space, and then
what is phrasing? There's a good question, because I know singers that try to teach phrasing. Here's how I teach it. When I sat in way years ago with that, when I was saying with Jackie Byard, he was so cool. Oh God.
We were just talking about Jackie Byard. One of his students is a good friend of mine, Dave Witham, pianist from LA. And he just, we put on some Jackie Byard and listened to how amazing he was and how people don't really know that. So yeah, Jackie Byard.
No, he died too. It's what it's, yeah, because he would have other gigs later on, and I would go sit in. And I even I had the gall to I went all the way out to Queens once to take a piano lesson with him. Because see, I learned it all myself because I'm a classical thing, but through teaching, I can comp. I never have performed on piano, but I can comp. But so I went to a few teachers. I went one with him. He taught me the one fingering, one. And then I went to two other ones, and then I had enough to just work with. But yeah, Jackie Byard. Anyway, I lost my thing again about why I was talking about Jackie Byard. Shoot, I'm sorry. It'll come back. I get excited, clearly.
It's a joy talking to you. Let me ask you about looping, though. You mentioned looping.
Oh, yeah, I got it. Yeah.
The looping, I also thought was so interesting in Jane Ira Bloom's work. And I know that you guys have made some music together. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, here's how I met Jane. Let's see, must have been the 70s, late 70s, before I moved away. I left Lispenard because it got expensive. It got a name, Soho. Every time it got a name, we had to move. We ended up in Tribeca. And once that got a name, we moved to Brooklyn because the rents went up. But I was living on Leonard and a block, and I would always find places to work like once a week, because that's how I learned. I learned everything out there. And there was a place on Greenwich Avenue, Prescott's it was called. And I was there every Tuesday night, and I got paid. The guy in the bar, he had a quota on his cash register, and we got everything over the quota. I don't know. Actually, I think Cecil Taylor came down there once to hear me. Cecil would go out,
Oh, I did that hang. I know.
You know about Cecil. Cecil.
Oh,
yeah. So anyway, I'm there one night, and Jane Ira Bloom walks in. This little, talk with the blonde hair, with the saxophone, I mean, I say that because we're women, we know that. I said, even me, it was like, wow. So she asked to sit in, and the rest was history, because it was we had such, and then I was in her band. I did her music for a while. And then, of course, my first, after the All Out, she's on. Because by that time we had been playing, and that was the beauty of it. It was in and out. And so, yeah, it was great work. When I liked her tunes, I might revive some of them because I have some of her pieces. I should revive them. I got too much repertoire, not enough gigs. I have a lot of good repertoire that are, can jump right off into, like you said, because each piece has to have its own little world. It's like if you're doing standards, I'm a set planner, but I'm the first that would deviate too. But I used to wonder about that because the Cats, I don't know, did they plan? They just called. Sometimes they didn't even call the key, they'd be playing. You must have experienced that.
Yeah, and that was part and parcel of the thing. And I had a friend that was playing with Ahmad Jamal, and those modulations would just happen, and you had to move. So this is not rehearsed. I mean, I guess it's like we all rehearse so that we can be loose. We all practice so that we can get to that point where we really are free to move in directions where the music is going, so that we have a kind of flow. We want to create an experience, right? We don't want it to just be us letting, all of our feelings hang out. It's not that. It's more focused than
It's
that.
like one piece. You know, it's, if it gets stagnant, there's no change at all. And I'm so into it. I talk to my, I work like that and privately with them, where we end up planning a set. Do you
Yeah.
have enough ingredients? Actually, Jane used that term. There's these ingredients in a set, in any kind of piece. Sometimes it's melodic, sometimes it has time, sometimes there's space. And so you learn to do that on the spot, you know. But I am a set planner. I was always curious about, everybody's different. You know, what I would be getting these groups. Do they plan or they no plan? And Oregon was, I was very close to them. I always use them example. They had a great little system, because I'm totally into it. And maybe I have a formula for mine, who cares? But I know that I know the opening piece is very important, but it's different every night. How do I feel? But they used to have this little felt thing. They would put maybe I'll do that. I should do this anyway, within a group thing. If you're going to plan it together, they had the names and they would, you know, they would move instead of writing, you know. I thought that was great.
I use index cards.
And so you have the titles on each one?
Yeah, I do index cards and I move them around.
Well, that's great, you know. And so, yeah, I'll tell you, I'm curious. You know, one of my other big deals, maybe you have it, maybe you don't know, in my life was when Muhal Richard Abrams, you know, I don't know if you have that album. It's called.
Well, I wanted to talk about Muhal since, you know, we lost him fairly recently too. And he was so important, even to guys like me growing up, listening to the AACM and emulating a number of principles. First of all, the DIY. And, you know, you go out and you are your whole package, and you promote yourself, and you have to work on yourself. You have to do a solo concert. You have to be able to play solo. I remember that was a Muhal tenet. So I studied with Andrew Cyril and Steve McCall, and just through that association was able to get a taste of how important Muhal was to all those guys. Please tell me a little bit about Muhal.
Well, the first time of course I did, obviously, I'm in the 60s. I mean, I knew about the Chicago Art Ensemble and all that stuff, but I went to, he gave a lecture I think it might've been downstairs at the Vanguard. I don't know. They had this little series, and all I remember is he just spoke, and there was something he said that it just stuck. And I started listening to his stuff. I hadn't really met him, but he was just talking about don't mix music and money and just the whole, just do it. It was just so true blue. And then I didn't think anything of it. And I guess this was also in the 70s was very important for my, you know, there was a big, that decade was fantastic, late 60s and 70s. So I don't know if you knew Kobe Narita of the Universal Jazz Coalition. Now, this is somebody you must look up. But she just had this little, I was working in an office once, and this little envelope came by, and it was like Universal, I was opening mail, and it was Universal Jazz Coalition. Oh my God, what's that? You know, and so I looked it up, and I looked her up. She used to present concerts. Anyway, she would work with the artists a lot. She was wonderful. She's alive. She's in her 90s. Making flyers, she did so much. You must know about her. You'll have to look her up. So anyway, she got this gig on 3rd Avenue at a place called the Blue Hawaii every weekend, and she put me in there. I could work with it. Here was what, $50. You could do a trio, $50 each, guaranteed. I mean, that, you know, wow, you know, best food. I had to borrow clothes to do the gig, but I could do it with anybody I wanted. John Abercrombie, you know, all the best, you know. And Muhal showed up. He showed up at my gig, and then and I was just doing, you know, mostly standards, but whatever. I'm always have by that time I had whatever the heck I'm doing. I was in there, you know. So all I remember was I had 2 kids by then, and my ex was a drummer, you know, Frank Clayton, and we were together, but we had a loft. We were in the loft in Brooklyn, I think it was. And I just remember, I'll never forget, it was significant. I was laying in bed. It was one of those times when I'm like, I can't do this like this anymore. You know, it was one of those times. And the phone rang, and it was Muhal. And he asked me to do a gig at the Public Theater. Remember, they used to do them
I do.
after. Yes. Me, J.D. Perrin, Chico Freeman, George Lewis, Muhal. Oh my God, the best of the free. And me. Do you know what that does? I mean, how important that could be to me, a chick singer, white. I'm sorry. I mean, it was all in there. I had all of that stuff. But this Muhal heard me. He heard what the heck I was doing, and he hired me to do that. And then we recorded. He recorded after. So he is significant to me. As a matter of fact, maybe you were there. When he turned 80, he invited me and Marty Ehrlich and what's his name, the bass player, and a couple other people to do with a concert. I mean, you see how excited I get? I'm saying that because that's not usual. You don't, all those fantastic players that play with him. So he always said he wished he had another instrument to play with me because he felt that the piano was confining for what anyway. So he is important. He was the father of all that stuff. And I would go every time I could hear him and his solo stuff, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and my buddy Brad Jones played bass for him for many years. And, he was a conceptualist and he was a force.
Yeah.
And a force for creative musicians to take it and bring it out and not be so insular in a way too, to be part of society with the most abstract things, right?
Absolutely. And he believed that. I believe if you have to do your own music, you do your own. Of course, he was with Black, whatever, that Italian label for a while. But basically, he was saying, if you have to do it, you do it. You put your music out,
And it's
you
still
met him.
true.
He's such a gentle person. He was just it was so important for my self-esteem even because
Yes.
he was, oh, what are you talking about? Oh man, like he heard it but he wasn't pretentious, nothing. He just did his thing. And I can't remember, to be honest with you. I don't know why he died. I don't know, remember, it just seemed like a shock to me when he left because he didn't flaunt whatever being sick. He must have had something. I don't even know, it just
No, I know. Even Paul Motion, the same thing. He didn't tell anybody. He was just gone
right.
after,
Yeah, it's just and even Jean Lee. I mean, she was in Europe. We didn't know much, So that's
I think that's the way people prefer to do it, and it's their choice, obviously, right?
Absolutely.
Jay, it's just such a pleasure talking to you. But before we split, I know that you've got sort of a new release of an older trio recording from 2012 with Ed Neumeister and Fritz Power. And
Right.
I listened to some of that. That's a really cool project.
That's what we're doing now. In other words, Ed, I don't know if you knew about Fritz Power, but he was like the Viennese piano player. In other words, he played in and out. He was so great. And we happened to teach in Graz. That's how we got together. And I think I wrote it on thing, but it's like, in other words, after we would teach, they would come to my room. I said, let's just play, And then we set up a concert. And then we, blah, blah, blah. We did a little tour. And then, and I was the catalyst, but it was a cooperative group, in other words. So then before the last semester I did was 20 years ago. That's 20 years old. I'm sure that's 20 years old, that thing. But it doesn't matter. I think it's, anyway. So we, Ed and Fritz said, let's go into a studio and just record. And thank God, because then Fritz died of a heart attack. But just again, you don't know. It's like you didn't know. It was unexpected. And so we had that, and we sort of made some, I think Ed's wife made a cover, but it never was published or anything. And then a few months ago, just before this all happened, Ed said, Ed moved back to New York. Ed's in New York, He said, let's put this out. I have a label. Let's put it out. I mean, Sunnyside might have put it out, but this was fine. It's his label. And now we want to do it. So we did 3 live streams. That was the 3rd that I sent to you,
Yeah,
and but we chose Gary, and it was one of those. There's so many wonderful piano players that did, but there's something I knew Gary. He's younger. He was in Portland when I was in Seattle, and I knew he was great. And I'd hear him all the time, and So Ed brought him up, and that was it. That was the first one I was going to. We said, "Who can?" There's so many, and so it's compatible so far. It's very compatible, you know.
So people are able to see your streaming concerts how, Jay?
Well, it's too late now, I think. If there's someone I need to, I have links to a couple of them. So for people that I want, like friends and stuff, I just, like I sent you the link to that. That's it. Because that's the one thing you get when you do these live streams. You get the video, and that's good. And we can use it. So what we're going to do, you know, and Ed's high tech more than me. He can put things together, you know.
Are you going to do more of those?
Yeah, well, yeah, whatever we can. The next thing we have is at Maureen's in Nyack, which I've never been there, but it's small. But Sheila just had they stopped because of this surge. But I think maybe by January it may be open again. So we're going to do that, you know. And we're looking. The main thing is to do a tour in Europe, and that's all stopped now. The Europeans, I think, would really like this, you know. But again, the repertoire is who we are. We can do anything, in and out. And that's where I live. I'm sure that's where you live, too. Mm.
It's the best place to be, isn't it?
It is. It's developmental for many years. And a lot of people stop doing it. But for me, it's composition. You're a composer.
Well, this is the thing, Jay, and having been a young person growing up in the climate of you guys doing all of those different things, that I'm still interested in chamber music and classical music and studied all of the composition stuff, and then also did jazz, and then also did percussion music. And so I'd never felt limited because you guys weren't modeling that. You were saying, it's all on the table, youngster. Go for it. And I wanted to tell you that means a lot.
Well, it means a lot to me. And I think even what I'm doing, and again, there's some people that were not able to study with me, and they, you know, you're a handful. And so someone in DC, she always wanted, and here we go. But I do this free stuff with even some people never even heard it, you know. But I said, just sing. Kids do it. You know, and somehow it connects them, I think. I'm just saying, and to end that, why free music? You can do a tune without even being there. Be honest with you. Some singers are. You can do it. You got the beautiful melody, you're singing, and I'm like, I don't believe you, but you're there, and that's great. You have a nice voice. But truthfully, to start from scratch, to compose, you got to be there. You got no line that somebody wrote. You got no, you know, and then it pulls that out, and that connection of how you feel. I don't know which one. Oh, is that sad? Or I mean, it's not like that. It's not as simple. Transfers when you're doing a song. The connection of being there does, and I can only do it through, you know. And there's some young singers, they never did it, and pretty soon they're totally into it. I have them record something that I tell them, like that 410-2, play it back and sing free. So there you go. We keep inventing things to evoke whoever they are.
Being allowed to be who you are. It's
the bottom line. It really is. Because even singers, they can think, I want to do. I said, you are already what you are. You have your own voice. Don't look for anything. Just keep singing things you love. You said it. You know, you have a path. If you don't love it, you're not going to learn on it. Okay, so do whatever you want. You know. I just had a student today. She wants to do At Last. You know, I did a whole CD on Harry Warren, who wrote all these tunes. And nobody knows he wrote At Last. Nobody knows that. He wrote There'll Never Be Another You. So I call it Harry Who. But I said, I didn't do that song forever because Etta James. I don't want to, you know, that. And because she said, oh, I want to sing this. And I got this backtrack, and it's from Etta James. I said, do not listen to her another, you know, just sing it. And I want her to be who she is, and she can, you know, she can. You're right on. We are individuals.
It's the pleasure of being an individual that I guess is its own reward. But, you know, we do have to encourage young people, and you certainly have, and you are just a model of individualism, Jay Clayton.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
This has
Look
just been a
forward to
blast.
continue. I want to, I'll be looking at interviews, but stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Send me
Absolutely,
yours.
Jay. And
Okay.
thank you to everybody for listening and all of the support that we've been getting for these talks. And please like and subscribe and check out Jay Clayton at jclayton.com. All of her activity and music is there. You can stay in touch with her. Jay, thank you so much, and
You're so welcome.
stay well.
To be continued.
Happy holidays.
You too. Bye-bye. Bye, everybody.
Bye.